Imagine this. Imagine this. Within the next few minutes, you are about to discover a power so great that it can make people beg for you to speak. Sounds impossible. What if I told you this power has nothing to do with what you say, but with what you don't say? In today's chaotic world, we are drowning in noise. Every notification screams for attention. Every opinion is ready to explode just to be heard. No one has patience anymore. Even a blank stare can instantly turn into an argument. Have you ever wondered if the strongest people are actually the quietest ones? Remember Seneca's words, "An empty barrel makes the loudest noise." Let me share a story that will forever change how you see silence. On the edge of a vast desert town lived a wise woman. Her wisdom was known by everyone, yet she did not share it easily. One day, a young and ambitious merchant came to her, anxiety written across his face. "How can I earn respect?" he asked. "How can I make people truly value me?" The wise woman remained silent for a moment, listening carefully. Then she calmly said, "Return at dawn tomorrow. Say nothing. Just follow me." The next morning, she led the merchant into the desert. Among the endless dunes, she asked him to watch how the wind shaped the sand, how the desert commanded respect without saying a single word. The desert revealed its greatness through silence alone. Without speaking, the woman unveiled the lesson. Stillness can be more powerful than movement. Silence can leave a deeper mark than words. From that day on, the merchant applied this wisdom to his life. He no longer felt the need to constantly speak or prove himself. Through his silence, his steadiness, and his ability to act at the right moment, he became the most respected person in the town. By changing just one thing, he watched his entire life transform. In today's video, you'll learn how to bring the power of silence into your own life. In the next lesson, you'll discover why the strongest people are not those who react to everything, but those who know when to remain silent. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why sometimes the less you speak, the more respect people have when you finally do. But before we begin, here's what makes this different from anything you've heard before. These are not just theories. These are battle-tested Stoic principles that have transformed lives for over 2,000 years. If you're ready to discover why silence may be your greatest weapon, let's begin. 1. The power of silence. Have you ever felt so surrounded by noise that you no longer even know what you think? As if the chaos of the outside world has invaded the deepest corners of your mind. At some point, you need a dose of silence. A space that allows you to look inward and discover what you may have been ignoring. External noise doesn't just distort how we see the world, it blurs how we see ourselves. We live in a constant race toward noise, words, and endless activity. But who can stop in this race? More importantly, who has the courage to stop? In a world where notifications demand attention, endless conversations fill our minds, and every gap is stuffed with faster speech. Time slips through our fingers. But what if silence were your most powerful tool? To understand its importance, we must first understand what silence truly is. Silence is not merely the absence of speech. It is a space free from inner noise, a refuge where your deepest thoughts, usually drowned by daily stress, can finally be heard. In other words, silence is not emptiness. It is an opportunity for self-discovery. Throughout history, countless individuals have withdrawn from the chaos of the world to embark on deep inner journeys. Silent retreat is an ancient and powerful method for this purpose. It allows a person to step back and simply observe, without the obligation to react or respond. Silence is a radical act of stopping. By doing nothing, it creates space to finally focus on what truly matters. In this age of information overload and endless noise, silence becomes a sanctuary in the middle of chaos. At first, it can feel uncomfortable, even frightening. Because we've trained ourselves to fill every space with words, ideas, and sound. In silence, there is nowhere to run. You are left alone with yourself, and a true confrontation begins. As the Stoic philosopher Seneca said, "Tranquility is the highest good. But to find it, one must first learn to be silent." Seneca wasn't speaking only of not talking, but of stepping back far enough to see life from a wider perspective. 2. Listening with the soul. Have you noticed how, when someone is speaking, most of us aren't truly listening, but instead preparing our response? We've become programmed to answer rather than understand. Listening has lost its essence. It has been replaced by an almost compulsive need to be the first to interrupt with an opinion or judgment. Stoic philosophy, this school of thought that relentlessly emphasizes calm, reflection, and self-control, teaches us something simple, yet incredibly difficult to practice. Do not act impulsively. This pause is not only about controlling reactions, but also about how we engage with others. Stoics believed that just as emotions must be governed before decisions are made, responses must wait for the right moment. How many misunderstandings, unnecessary arguments, and awkward moments could be avoided if we simply listened instead of speaking? This does not mean being passive. It is an invitation to listen with the intention to understand, not to reply. When someone is going through a difficult time, our first instinct is often to offer advice. "If I were you, I'd do this. Maybe you should try that." But what if all that person truly needs is someone willing to listen without fixing, judging, or rushing to solve? This is where the true power of attentive listening lies. You don't need to have the solution. You just need to be there. Often, what people want is not an answer, but a presence. An attentive ear that listens without interruption, without judgment, and without minimizing what they feel. If we learn to listen this way, our relationships become far deeper and our interactions far more sincere. But to do this, we must step out of the automatic mode we live in, where the mind is always searching for the next brilliant idea or waiting for the perfect moment to interrupt. Let's look at this through the lens of Stoic philosophy. True wisdom is not found in the words we speak, but in the space we can create between them. Have you ever noticed how your body delivers a pre-programmed reaction the moment someone makes a disturbing comment or a situation becomes tense? Of course you have. It happens to all of us. The real question is this: do you ever stop and think about what you're actually doing, or do you simply surrender to inertia? Emotional control is not something you master overnight. It's a skill refined over time. At our most impulsive, we all carry a kind of reaction button, triggered by unwanted criticism, a wrong look, or a simple misunderstanding. In those moments, our strongest urge is to respond defensively. But when we give in to that urge, we usually enter a vicious cycle of fast reactions that make things worse instead of better. Think of a recent moment when you reacted without thinking, an argument with someone close to you, or a hurtful exchange at work. That quick reaction probably didn't help. The Stoics understood this deeply. This ancient philosophy doesn't sugarcoat the truth. Real strength is not in striking back, but in restraint. Instead of fighting emotions, Stoics observed them, understood them, and decided whether action was even worth taking. 1 minute of reflection can prevent days of regret. Strategic silence creates space, not to punish others, but to think, to refocus. Think of people who, in the middle of a conflict, remain silent, so silent that their presence itself creates unease. It's as if they're saying, "I'll let you speak, but I choose not to play your game." This kind of calm shows just how powerful silence can be. Conscious non-reaction is not weakness, it is strength in disguise. At first, it may feel like you're giving up the chance to defend yourself. In reality, you're defending yourself far more effectively, with calm, intelligence, and above all, dignity. As Epictetus said, true displays of power are found not in what you say, but in what you choose not to say. 4. Calm in the storm. Imagine being in the middle of a hurricane. Not a literal one, but a metaphorical storm where everything in your life seems to be going wrong. Your family exhausts you. Your job feels like a battlefield. Your friends, if you can still call them that, may or may not be supporting you. And there you are, trapped in a storm of emotions, thoughts, and stress, unsure whether you'll stay afloat. Now imagine that instead of panicking or running away, you pause, you take a deep breath, and rather than chasing the chaos, you become the center of it. I know, it sounds like cheap self-help talk. But what if I told you this is real wisdom, something the Stoics both knew and practiced? Remaining calm in chaos is more than a psychological trick. It's a survival strategy. Not just any strategy, but one of stepping back, staying silent while everyone else shouts, and refusing to be swept away by emotional currents. This inner stillness allows you to make rational decisions instead of acting on impulse. You've probably learned this the hard way more than once. Picture a crowded family dinner. Everyone defending their opinions, reopening old wounds, voices rising as tension fills the room. You feel the urge to jump in, to fix things, to defend yourself. But at that exact moment, you decide to step back. You say nothing. You breathe. You observe. You notice who's angry and why, which emotions are really speaking. The argument continues for a while, then people grow tired. Silence begins to settle. And then, calmly, clearly, you speak just a few words. Suddenly, something shifts. Everyone listens. Your voice rises like a guide cutting through the noise. Maybe your words end the argument. Maybe they give someone the emotional support they needed. Your silence has created an island of calm, carrying the power to resolve even the most complex situations. This is where the power of silence reveals itself. Observation before words, patience to wait for the right moment, and the ability to stop chaos with a single, precise message. Stoic philosophy teaches us to focus on what we can control and accept what we cannot. The idea is not to stop emotional winds from blowing, but to refuse to let them carry you away. Stay centered, because your true power lives in that silence. As Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, calm is not the absence of a storm, but the ability to remain steady within it. 5. The wisdom of observation. Have you ever considered that what you need isn't to have an answer for everything, but to learn when to remain silent? It sounds strange because we're so used to being the main character in our own story that the idea of being an observer feels dull. Yet how many times have your emotions overflowed simply because you didn't know how to step back? In this noisy world where everyone shouts opinions and demands instant responses, the art of quiet observation has largely been lost. Faced with difficulty, our first instinct is to reply, to defend, to intervene. But Stoic wisdom, which many see as harsh, invites us to something far simpler. Take one step back. The observing mind is like a spectator in a theater. It doesn't get dragged into the plot, but it understands it more clearly. This approach requires discipline because staying silent while everyone expects you to speak is not easy. Sometimes the best move is not to move at all. When you remain still, without rushing or interfering, this space of calm begins to open a deeper understanding of what's happening around you. Instead of emotionally engaging with every event, imagine yourself as a bridge between external stimuli and inner response. Does that sound strange? Let me tell you this. Most of your problems don't come from what happens to you, but from how you react to it. If you attach yourself to everything that affects you, you become a ping-pong ball in a ruleless game. But if you learn to observe without judgment, your mind becomes a far more powerful tool. Start simply. Whenever you feel something triggering your nerves, give yourself permission to step back. You don't need to do anything extraordinary or become a Tibetan monk. Just observe. What are you feeling? Why are you feeling it? Is reacting right now truly necessary, or can you afford to wait? You'll be surprised to see that when the world tries to force you to speak and you choose silence instead, people eventually begin to seek your words. And in that moment, you'll realize the control is entirely yours, not because you imposed yourself, but because you gave yourself the chance to see things from a different perspective. 6. When silence speaks louder. Sometimes words are unnecessary. You already know this. At times, the smartest thing you can do is to remain silent while everything around you continues on its own course. This is true and interesting because we live in a society that constantly tells us we must speak, express, and prove ourselves. But what really happens when you choose silence? I'm not talking about awkward pauses or the empty space between a hello and a goodbye. I'm talking about a kind of silence that says more than words ever could. A silence that turns into an invisible yet powerful slap, one that leaves a lasting mark. You may have experienced this yourself. You're in the middle of a conversation and you feel it sliding into a dead-end tunnel. You know continuing to talk won't help, yet the other person won't stop. Worse still, every word that leaves your mouth only makes things worse. So why not step back and let silence do the talking for you? It seems that what unsettles people most is deep, unresolved silence. How can someone who remains silent in the middle of confrontation leave a deeper impact than someone who keeps fighting? In moments like this, silence acts as a mirror, reflecting what the other person needs to see but refuses to accept. Think of the times you chose not to respond instead of continuing an argument. How did the other person react? More often than not, silence tests people's patience. It forces them to reflect on what they're really saying. More importantly, you begin to realize that your worth is measured not by what you say, but by what you choose not to say. This has nothing to do with being passive or submissive. It's about knowing when to engage and when silence will speak more powerfully than any sentence ever could. The Stoics understood that not everything requires a response, and that often the best response is no response at all. Because silence is not emptiness, it is filled with answers. The one who remains silent is not weak, but grounded. In that space of silence, instead of losing your composure, you find yourself. The other person may not understand your silence at first, but eventually they'll see that it carries far more weight than shouting or empty words. 7. The art of letting go. Every time you try to cling to something or someone, it can feel as though no matter how hard you try, everything slips through your fingers and stress crashes over you like an unstoppable wave. But what if I told you the secret lies in letting go, in stepping back? Yes, I know. It sounds like something straight out of a cheap self-help book. But listen carefully. What they rarely tell you is that letting go is actually one of the most powerful actions you can take. Letting go doesn't mean abandonment, emotional numbness, or giving up on what you love. It means understanding that what you love does not own you. When you chase everything you think you need, you end up dragging yourself behind it. Holding on is the easy part. Letting go is the hard one. And here's the key. Letting go is not a loss, it's liberation. Releasing your grip brings clarity and a sense of control you didn't realize you were missing. Imagine being trapped in a never-ending argument, the kind that isn't really about truth, but about proving who's right. The instinct is always to speak louder, to pile on more arguments. But what happens if instead you step back and stay silent? Not out of fear, but out of understanding. Stoic philosophy speaks often about this kind of distance, though not in a romantic or mystical way. The Stoics didn't retreat to mountains to meditate, nor did they treat detachment like a miracle cure. What they taught was simple. Let go of what you cannot control and focus on what you can. Letting go isn't about abandoning what you love. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of expectations and anxieties that people and situations create. And when you release those expectations, you discover a level of inner peace you may never have imagined. Of course, this doesn't happen overnight. If it were easy, none of us would be searching the internet for quick fixes or buying books that promise to free us from everything that binds us. When you understand the power of stepping back, you realize that instead of losing something, you gain something far greater: patience that nothing and no one can take from you. How often have you noticed the urge to force life forward? We've all fallen into the trap of believing that waiting equals passivity, that it's time wasted. But let me tell you this: what looks like inaction to some is, for others, a chance to observe, to think, and to act more wisely later. This is where true power comes from, this underestimated patience. And when you feel overwhelmed by the anxiety of needing to have everything, patience is often the answer. Imagine for a moment that you are in the middle of a conversation. The other person is speaking to you, but you are not truly listening. You are waiting for your turn to reply, worrying about how to present your idea. What happens then? The dialogue starts to move too fast. You miss important details. And in the end, you say things you would never have said calmly. Now imagine doing the opposite. You take a step back, remain silent for a moment, and refuse to rush. What happens then? Suddenly, what seemed like a simple response turns into a deep and thoughtful insight. This principle is as old as time itself. The Stoics, for example, understood the power of waiting perfectly. For them, patience was not merely endurance or survival, it was a form of wisdom, a method of thinking before acting. As Epictetus implied, what matters is not reaction, but reflection. Modern life is filled with pressure to move fast, to decide in an instant, to never waste time. Yet true strength is not found in quick replies, but in wise responses. In many situations, that wisdom grows when you pause, observe the landscape, and resist the urge to rush. I am not telling you to become a hermit or someone who waits forever without acting. What I am saying is that real power often lies in not hurrying, in allowing events to unfold naturally. Step back, stay silent, and sometimes you will see others begin to beg for your intervention. The power of patience and waiting is not just a philosophical idea. It is a practical and powerful tool we can all use in daily life. As Nelson Mandela once said, waiting is not the absence of action, but the anticipation of what is to come. 9. The peace of acceptance. Have you ever been so unsure of what to do that you wondered whether to curse everything or hide under the sheets and disappear from the world? That intense frustration arises when you realize that something you are desperately trying to change is still beyond your reach. It can feel as if the world is deliberately placing obstacles in your path just to display its injustice. But what if the deepest transformation does not come from changing what you can control, but from changing how you choose to see what you cannot? This brings us to acceptance, a small concept that somehow always seems complicated to practice. The truth is this: accepting what cannot be changed is not surrender. It is stepping into a calm space where clarity becomes possible. When you add Stoic philosophy to this, you gain a powerful ally. This is not about submitting to everything, but about recognizing that some things are simply outside your control. The Stoics argued that while we cannot change what lies beyond our control, we can always control how we respond to it. The key lies in observing without rushing to label events as good or bad. Acceptance allows us to witness what happens without letting our emotions seize total control. It invites us to see beyond the small dramas of the moment and view life from a wider perspective. So, how do we practice acceptance? First, remind yourself that not everything needs to be changed, fixed, or solved immediately. By giving yourself permission to accept what is, you free yourself from the burden of controlling every detail. Second, allow that inner silence to emerge, a silence that over time becomes stronger than any defensive strategy. And finally, be patient, because real transformation never happens overnight. As the ancient sages taught, peace is not found by changing the world, but by changing how you look at it. If you've made it this far, write in the comments that you are more valuable for remaining silent, because silence is not just an action, it is a stance. When you stay silent, thoughts speak instead of words. This makes you more understanding, deeper, and more effective as a person. That comment will show that you are part of a community that understands the power of silence, and it will help this message reach more people. Discovering the power of silence is not just about watching. It's about bringing real change into your life. Share what you learned from this video or how silence has affected your life in the comments. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to continue this philosophical journey with us. Your support is my greatest motivation for creating this content. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video. And remember, sometimes silence speaks louder than the strongest words.